Okay, so hi all, my name's Bonita, and today I'm going to be hosting the panel on editorial design. And today we're really going to be focusing on how in an ever-increasing digital world book, magazine and design, how does it continue to excite the printed and digital sphere? And what I'm going to do today is actually discuss and look at, the different work that you guys have selected, how the experience was. And to kickstart, I just want to highlight that on the call, we have Marseille, creative director. We have Susanna, also creative director. We have Sian, also an associate professor. And we have Darren, who is a content director. I will start with Susanna, with your first choice. So here I can see that your first choice was the Breonna Taylor piece. I'd love to understand why, what really drew you to that piece, and your judging experience of that.
Well, it was, we were looking into quite a lot of work. It's illustration, and it's really, my first impact was not really very rational. It's just like this feeling when you are looking into a lot of illustration, and then you look at that cover of Vanity Fair, and the piece was really, it made me stop. It was like, what is this? It's like, and then you try to rationalize after. It's a picture, it's a portrait of Breonna Taylor, and I think the portrait is very powerful. It's really something. In the jury session, we started to discuss the work. It was a bit like a religious portrait, It's like the elegancy, the peaceful face. I mean, it's amazing, and that's very strong visually, and maybe also because you are very used to see photography on the cover of Vanity Fair, and illustration has a really strong power there. I mean, it's very unusual. And I think we are always looking for that piece of surprise and something that really strikes you when you look at it. But then when you start reading about the work process of that illustration, and well, I was not familiar with the work of the artist, and Amy Sherald. She's a very well-known artist, but I really didn't know it was from her. But then when you look at the process, I think she did such an amazing work of investigation, because she to produce that portrait, she was talking with the mother for a long time. She chose an African-American stylist to design the dress. She chose a model which was the same size as Brianna, the dress, to dress the dress. And when what you feel, I can't explain better than this. You really feel like if it's a bit like she was alive, like I think the artist gave life to her in such a beautiful homage, and you kind of feel it on illustration. So it's something that I think you cannot do it with a picture. It's something much more artistic, much more, well, it's beautiful, and you can feel it when you look at it. So I think it really has this power of making you stop, making you look at it. And if I saw it in a store, I would buy that magazine. I mean, it's something that it really grabs you. It's beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's definitely an amazing piece, and it caught a lot of eyes. I completely agree, bringing it to life, a very difficult topic and subject. And yeah, no, I agree with all the points made. Thank you. So I'll now move on to Marseille to discuss your first choice, which was the When Cooking Was a Crime piece.
Yeah, it's quite an unusual selection, because I guess the subject matter that it's covering is also not something that is maybe the most pleasant, but I found it very interesting. I think judging initially began online, and so looking at it kind of caught my attention, especially the story and the considerations that were made by the designer. So the three questions that we were asking ourselves when we were judging the process online to begin with was it beautifully designed? Was it aesthetically pleasing? Like well executed, and was it fit for purpose? And when you read like the considerations that the designer made, it just, from the color to the folding technique that was used to the cover design, everything was so well considered. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about design, where it's not just how beautiful something is, but it's about, does it do what it's supposed to do? And how are you engaging with people beyond just, well, this is the story? When you see it in person, so online is one experience of it, but seeing it in person and being able to experience the texture of the paper, they use a technique which was, I think, French folding. So because cooking in your cell was illegal during that time, the designer has taken that experience into consideration and has wanted to engage the reader in that way by creating these secret folds that have like secret interviews in it, or, you know, photography of the cooking that was done in the cells to kind of allow the reader to engage with prisoners of that time in terms of the secrecy of it. I think all of that stuff is just really beautiful and really considered. Even the coloring was supposed to reflect elements of the prison at that time. And then it's got like this plastic wrap around it, which also is kind of similar to like an evidence bag and stuff. There was just so much there, so much richness to the storytelling beyond the subject matter, but also trying to engage the reader in on many different levels. And I think in person, it was just so captivating. Like you wanted to keep looking at it to discover new elements of what you could see. And I guess to the conversation that we're having around, you know, the experience of something digitally and the validity of something in print, the photography of the book didn't half do it justice when you saw it in person and being able to engage with the story in that way. Yeah, I really found it really interesting. And it was a story that, you know, wasn't something I was familiar with. And it's very interesting to consider that something that we often do quite daily and quite easily in terms of cooking was illegal. And so the techniques that these prisoners adopted to be creative, to eat, was really interesting, really inspiring.
It's very creative. When I looked at it, I definitely agree with all the points that you've made, super creative. And, you know, it's crazy, you know, the points that you make around, you know, not being able to like eat and cook. But I think it's one that stood out to me. It made me want to dig into the culture and understand, okay, what's here. So thank you, Marseille. Now moving on to Sian, also known as Nancy, looking at the piece Imbalance.
Yes, I choose Imbalance. This is definitely my favorite work. I think the creation of Imbalance is a reflection on society, the city, reality, and absurdity. And the designer of Imbalance has created a kind of ridiculous world where all kinds of absurd things are happening. When I first look at this work, I feel that the pictures are absurd. We don't know. I don't know what these pictures are talking about and what these characters are doing. I mean, there are lots of imaginations, and we learn more. When we learn more, I will find that the topic is about COVID-19. Which is, I think, just explains the absurdity of the picture. And at the beginning of the outbreak, everyone probably thought that the COVID-19 was ridiculous. No one cares. I think the series of absurd things happening in the picture are a kind of metaphor for absurd COVID-19. So I think the picture and the topic are they just match. They are right. And the work is full of imagination and of course, very good drawing. I love his drawing. And of set printing with the, how to say that, by a vibrant, yes, sport colors are also conveyed the amazing effect, which has a strong visual impact. And for me, I think a breakthrough in creative is important, as well as the social influence of works, whether it can generate new value and whether it allows people to generate new thinking and inspiration in the process. Rather than a simple, delicate picture and excellent technology. So I think if you only do a beautiful design, I'm afraid it doesn't work. And that's why I think the Imbalance did an excellent work.
Mm-hmm. No, completely agree. And, you know, it's all about what captures your eye and the story behind it. So I definitely agree with all the points that you've made there. Thank you. Moving on to Darren, with your first choice, Dove.
Yes, so my first choice was Dove, which is a kind of, at first glance, is sort of the obvious poster child for our times. It's Courage is Beautiful. It's a series of portraits of NHS key workers as they've finished a long, grueling shift looking after people with COVID and kind of having all of the PPE mask lines still on their faces. I mean, this was probably the only thing we were unanimous on in our judging pool. Most of the team kind of had differences of opinion here and there, but this was, I think, was celebrated because although we've seen these before, mostly as selfies on social media of nurses kind of showing the pressure they're under, it was like a confluence of a number of things. Only Dove and the brand it's built about being real beauty and campaigning for real beauty and showing kind of the beauty in the everyday as opposed to excessively retouched and airbrushed images. Only they could have kind of got away with this as a campaign. The execution is flawless. When you think of the logistics of having to take someone who's just been working for 14 hours and the last thing they want to do is sit in front of a photographer and have their photo taken, they've managed to capture kind of the energy, the life of each of their subjects. So they're kind of really wonderfully done, beautifully executed. But the most important thing, I think, is I think these will become kind of totemic images of our time. I think when we look back in 5 years on this mad world that we're in right now, and thankfully kind of slowly coming out of, when we look back, those images will stand as a testament to what it was really like. I care massively about the plight of key workers and the fight that they've had to kind of be on the front line, but also to reframe the popular opinion of what they're about. For too long, we demonized key workers as being kind of unimportant or unskilled or 0 hours contracts or kind of migrants that we don't really care very much about. And this pandemic has put them front and center. They've made them into our heroes. And I think it's images like this that we'll look back on and have our best chance of remembering that.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely, I agree. I think, you know, these images, as much as, yes, they will circulate on social media, I think we actually have to acknowledge that it will become a huge part of history. And they are images that when we look back, we'll see in years to come that will, you know, bring out a lot of emotion and memories. So no, I definitely agree. I think Dove, are very few brands that would get away with this, but completely agree. Thank you. So I want to throw a spanner in the works. I'd love to know, using one word, how would you describe the entire judging experience? And I will start with Darren.
Oh, can I have 2 words?
Yeah, go for it.
Painful fun.
Painful fun. Love it. Next, Nancy.
Fun and combination.
Love it. I'm happy for you guys to go 2 words if that works as well. Next, Susanna.
I'll go with 2 words too: honest and fair.
Honest and fair. Love it. And Marseille.
Yeah, I'll do 2 words. Seems though that's the number we're going with. I think it was definitely inspiring and invigorating. Haven't been around, you know, people for a long time, so it was quite nice to be able to be around peers and to really get into debate. And I just feel like that kind of like invigorated life and desire for design. Yeah.
So I'd love to have an open discussion about, you know, how different things that are happening in the world, cultural issues to general trends in general with the work that we've seen. How do you feel like this has impacted the work that's essentially been presented and submitted?
Our category is a craft category, you know, illustration. So of course you are looking into the craft itself. But when a powerful story comes across, you know, it's craft can also be about that. We talked about the Breonna cover, but there were other examples. For instance, a part of the jury was very impacted with a Chinese piece, a Chinese series of illustrations that we thought they were beautiful, unique. We have never seen them before. But then there were some Chinese members in the jury that said, well, this is kind of common for us to look at this technique. So, of course, there is a lot of context that is also always necessary. And even in craft, if you have a strong story to tell, it really comes across. About the work Nancy was telling, the imbalance, it's a kind of course, it can work on the opposite. That was very curious, that piece, because most of the people first didn't judge it very good because we couldn't quite understand what was being said. But then when we talked about it, we said, but that's what's really amazing about this. This is kind of hypnotic, different, fresh, and we have no idea what they are talking about. So I think it's kind of a playground where everything works as long as you have a good story, a strong context story, surprising use of a technique, a work done with incredibly amount of love. I mean, I think everything kind of works.
Sure. No, I agree. And, you know, when looking at this year's work, do you feel like, you know, the different things that are happening in the world, or any issues, cultural issues that we're having, did you feel like there was a repeat pattern of these themes?
It definitely had an effect on ours, on photography. Obviously, much harder to do photo shoots. I think pretty much everyone became an illustrator in lockdown because there was nothing else to do, frankly. Once you'd reached the end of Netflix, you kind of had to pick up a pen and paper. Photography was very different. And I think there was clearly an effect. And I think the standard of the work that we saw, we didn't hand out any yellow pencils, and because the standard wasn't really up there. And I think the biggest debate we had, what made it kind of fun but painful, was so many of the judges, and myself included, kind of fell into this trap of going, it's amazing what they've achieved given the world, right? Given the state we're in and the way things are going, they've managed to do something really well. And I think a D&AD pencil is about removing that context. The bottom line is, we will remember it in 5 years' time. For the Dove campaign, probably we will, for different reasons to the photography. But for the others, are we kind of giving them a pass because, like, the world's been a bit terrible? Are we being too nice? And so should we kind of judge it on the merit of, is it beautiful? Will we remember? And once we kind of got past that, it became very clear that there has been a big impact on photography. I think, you know, what had been put through to the shortlist, what we thought was worth kind of considering, on second glance, I don't remember half of what we saw, and that's probably a damning indictment of the kind of quality of work we had in front of us. I would love to have seen something that was authentically about George Floyd, Black Lives Matter. I'm really passionate about diversity. I've just co-founded a photography and illustration agency, which is serving underrepresented artists. So in the creative industry in the UK especially, there aren't enough women, people of colour, people with disabilities, or people from working class backgrounds, and they just don't get a shot at finding an agent and getting work. So we've set up an agency to support them. And I'd love to see work like that, which takes a fresh perspective on the world, or brings in something real from the world and gives it a twist. I think the few times we saw things that reflected the world we're in right now, they didn't give it a twist. It was pretty straight up. If I was going to sum it all up, unfortunately, I'd say it just wasn't good enough. That was the problem.
No, all points understood, definitely. I think, you know, the different trends and cultural issues that there have been, it could have been definitely a big opportunity for individuals to, you know, look at different ways, like they could tell stories using photography. So I completely agree and understand. On that, you know, this is to everyone. Is there something that you wish you saw more of throughout the pieces that you looked at? Was there any pieces that you thought, oh, that was great, but, you know, if they gave a bit more of this, it would have been better? So any tips around, you know, what could have the individuals done to, you know, get their work out there and essentially be selected?
Some of the work felt very expected. I think a lot of the focus was on the craft and how beautiful something could be executed, which is, you know, very nice to look at and engage with. But I think that one of the things that makes design a truly necessary and profound thing is curiosity. And I found that a lot of curiosity kind of was missing. I felt like people were doing very safe things that they know would maybe stand out because of the craft that had gone into it, or maybe the story that was being told. We had some pieces that were talking about, you know, Black lives, and there's a way that you can do that, which is just like, oh, checkboxy. And I think it's very obvious to see. And I think there are some pieces that are really like curious and an exploration, and you're seeing the thinking happening and you're seeing the working out of that. And I felt like a lot of that authenticity, that authentic curiosity was missing. My second choice, not for the execution, but you can see the exploration of thought. So it was about, it was called The Boy Who Could Not Wait. It was a kid's book, and the printing technique that was used, the layered paper, and then also like wanting to encourage children to wait, and the beauty of patience and waiting. And they also included a tactile element where the last page of the book has cress seeds in it, and you can lay it on the ground and you water it and you have to wait for it to grow. And so you have like a practical experience of waiting that the child can actually learn from and experience, without it just being a very safe story of waiting. For me, it was the risk taking that was inspiring, and the pushing through to tell the story anyway, and to think of other ways to tell the story beyond just the words and then the images. There was also, you know, the actual growing of the cress seeds. A lot of people are looking for stability, safety, and security. But I think that was kind of reflected in design, where there wasn't a lot of risk taking.
Besides being a craft category, and the execution, the detail, of course, are very important. But when you have a strong story behind, the work is so much greater. I mean, it's and you have some examples like Wombstories, which is a wonderful story, a wonderful piece of communication where illustration is taken to a higher level because of the story it's being told. It's not just an execution demonstration. It's each piece of the story is using different techniques to make the story bigger. I feel that even in a craft category, it makes all the difference if you have a strong story to tell. It's just a means to touch people, to communicate with people, and it's not just a technique exhibition. I mean, it's you really have to have a strong story to tell. There is a beautiful piece of work for women domestic violence called Blue Light Animation, and it's beautiful because of this of the powerful message and the craft being used to tell that powerful message. And maybe I would have loved to see more of those.
I would have loved to have seen people maybe have a bit more fun and playfulness. I feel like a lot of the work that was submitted was quite serious topics, and very focused, I think, on what Susanna's saying, like with craft and technique, which is again lovely to see. But I think have fun and enjoy creating.
My worry is that this is actually more of a long-term trend than just a kind of COVID bad couple of years trend. And we see it as this kind of increasing homogenization of what works and what doesn't. And the biggest example, of course, is Instagram. There is a way to get likes on Instagram, and you produce a particular picture, usually of a very pretty young woman who is heavily made up and from a certain angle, or you take something of a social cause, pinning your colors to that flag. And because we're growing up in a world where it's binary, where you kind of do that and you work and it works, or you don't do it and nobody sees it, that we have so many artists growing up in a world where there are rules. And that flair, that creativity, that freedom of expression is kind of being lost because there's so much other stuff to see that gets prominence because it fits the algorithm or because it's the expected way.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I definitely feel that and see that and find myself fighting to not fall victim to it. Even in the work that I create outside of my job, I've said to myself, if I don't choose to share this on social, will the outcome be different? Will I have more fun? Will I feel less pressured for it to be something that appeals to others? So I've taken away the idea that this is work that I'm going to share. So now that that's not a thing, that it's not for anybody else and it's just for me, what will it be? And I think, to be honest, I don't know how we can influence others if we are not ourselves living out what we're saying, we're professing to want to see and professing to believe. And so at this stage, I'm trying to focus on how can I not fall victim to it, because I see it. And it's so easy to do because you want to be liked. People want to be liked, right? You want your work to be validated and approved, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're great at what you do. It means that you're liked.
Make something for yourself that you're proud of and that you think is beautiful for you. And people will like it. People will buy it. But if you make it because Thumper 32791 give you a retweet, then you're falling into a black hole, which is taking you to a place where you're just going to make the same as the next person to come along.
I think this situation will be good because we can, we can now study abroad and we can travel and we have the internet and we know different cultures. We actually know that, but of course, not deep understanding. So, in the online judging part, I spent about more than 100 hours judging the works because I need to search for the events, cultural backgrounds, and etc. behind these works to deep my understanding to judgment of these works in order to prevent misjudgment caused by my cultural differences or my lack of understanding of the creative background. And as Chinese designer, there are often, we made the situations that we think these works are good, but not be selected. But the other works we think is general, but get a pencil. So due to different cultural background, I think this is quite normal. And we try our best to be fair when we're judging, right? But illustration part, we discussed for a long time, I think 2 days, more than nearly 10 hours. But it may be still, not absolutely, absolutely fail because we don't do deep understanding. So I don't think it is necessary to fully understand understand or accept it. But whether this work is connected to the society or focus on culture can be seen. That is to say, it is a comprehensive expression of many aspects. Can we feel strong emotions rather than focusing on only one point?
Thank you. I feel like there's so much to unpack, to, wrap up with the topic, that we're looking at in mind, of how in an ever increasing digital world, book, magazine, and newspaper design continue to excite in the printed and digital sphere. What key takeaway have you all taken from this year's work?
I guess it's all about what we've been talking about. You have to have something of yourself to give. You have to have soul. You have to have something unique. I think that's the work that really stands out. It can be a process, can be a story, can be a way of doing, but it has to be something unique. I think people are looking for that now, for authenticity, for this like you were saying, this willing to be loved. No, it's what makes us look for something which is special. And I think it's that is ultimately is what is awarded, and there is no formula. Of course, you will see a lot of people copying, and in this social media environment we are living now, people copy everything just for the results, right? But ultimately, what really touches someone, it's something that is unique, which is special, and it comes from inside, for something that's special that you have to give or to tell.
Thank you. And Nancy, one key takeaway?
Well, I think the current design categories are not so limited. So they are all links to categories and subject cooperation. So I think the cross-industry and multidisciplinary cooperation has always been the direction of future. It is happening actually, and we can see lots of works like they win the pencil, and they are not just focused on one bullet points, maybe the other aspects. So I think it's more how to say that, the combination. Yes, yeah.
I do think being able to have a good story, but being able to not just have a story and just rely on the story. You still need to have the exploration of how you're going to tell the story. Who is it for? To consider these things and for them to be all a part of enhancing the story. The execution is also a part of it. Bringing yourself is a part of it. Like how you're perceiving the story, your experience of the story is actually far more compelling at times than the story itself. I think being curious is a really underestimated but very important thing, because if you're curious, it's going to be beyond just what is expected or what is liked. It's your exploration of it. I think in light of the digital age and how that is continuing to accelerate, I don't have any doubts that print will continue to exist and excite, because we're human. We enjoy tactile experience, and not only that, keepsake, something that you found, that you discovered in another country potentially. Like I buy books that I know I can never read because I don't understand the language, but I love how it's been made. I love how it feels in my hand. I don't have any fear or concern that print will no longer be valid or something that can compete. I just think that we have to continue to be curious with print, because there is so much that is afforded to us within it. Beyond the story, there's print technique, there's paper stock, there's color choices, there's scale. The scale of something can impact you. And I think it would have been great to have seen a bit more exploration of scale within this year's work.
The thing that I've seen more than anything, particularly with image work, photography and illustration, is that artists are becoming more like a fulfillment house than they are a creative source. And what I mean by that is that there used to be a time long ago, before all you know what on, where you would create imagery as a means of telling a story. And that happens less and less now. Mostly photography, especially, but illustration as well, becomes a complement to the words that tell the story. And that's particularly in editorial design. The images are just garnish to help kind of ram home the point the headline is making. And that's not what it's for. It should be there to say something. And if it doesn't say something, it shouldn't be there. And so I would urge people to kind of to think that craft is one thing. Honing your techniques is like that's the day job. It's the boilerplate stuff you do. It's the thing. If you're learning to be a painter, then it's the way of holding your paintbrush, right? You kind of need to figure it out before you can do anything. So craft is important, but you have to work until you've got something to say, and then you only produce the work that says something. And I encourage all artists to kind of just have freedom to keep working and to not judge your work based on, do I like it? Does it look good? But to go, does this say something? And does it say something, more importantly, that I believe in or that I care about? But as long as it says something, it communicates. That's the whole job. And I think if we don't do that, if we allow photography and illustration to continue this route of being garnish that makes the words more pretty or palatable, then it becomes a medium no one respects.
I think the internet age has replaced traditional printed materials such as books, magazines, and newspapers to a large extent by the function of information communication. And we can communicate information through paper or other media. This requires thinking about what other traditional media are worth of our attention beside the function of communication information. Like, for example, a book is a space carrier composed of a paper, which conveys information through the five senses of a person. This kind of information is diverse, not just visual. There are also like touch, like smell, and so on. So I think like for books, the book doesn't necessarily have to be related to the text in the future, maybe, and it doesn't have to carry text information. It can be used as an independent artwork.
I completely agree, and I think that fits with Marseille's point as well, which is increasingly in this world where a digital file of a book is free and easy to download, and a printed product costs money to produce, and artists to produce, and printers, and delivery, and logistics, and so on. So printing a book or a magazine is a conscious choice. Like you're choosing to put it in that medium for a reason. So the job is to kind of justify why. I think print will survive, and it should survive because it's brilliant. And it's a beautiful tactile medium, but you have to kind of justify it. You have to say it was worth you buying this because, and as long as we have that on our heads, it will continue to thrive and grow.
You'll see maybe more and more what is more disposable is very digital and all that, but then you will still have space to have a special piece, a printed one, a book, a magazine, something that you want to keep, and that value has to be put on. No, it's something that maybe will stay longer with you. It's an object. It has that tactile relationship, but you have to. You should put that artistic value on it in a way to make it worth it. No,
not every book need to print it, but some of them need to exist. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, this is all very, very interesting. And thank you again all for your time. like to say individually, thank you, Marseille, thank you, Susanna, thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Darren, for your time and also being a jury on this panel.